for interim CEO and then selection of one of those candidates. We are going to follow the protocol that was set by our previous president, Lisa King, in that there are 10 questions that we'll ask both of the candidates. And then there are 2 questions each that are individual for them. And then we'll have, and they will have 2 minutes to answer each one of those 12 questions. Then we'll open it up for 10 minutes to the board for them to ask questions. And to begin, we will allow each candidate to give us 5 minutes to tell us about their experience and give us any information about the position and how they would handle it. So we will start with ladies first. Rhonda McCabe, our interim CFO.
Good morning. Okay, can you hear me okay? We'll do a mic check. Well, good morning. I'm glad to see everyone's here and that we survived the Brady romance that my husband and Christine's husband love so much. First, I have a statement that I would like to read to kind of for the board. First, I would like to thank the board for considering me for the interim CEO position. As you know, this was not a position that I sought, but when I was approached by the board chair, I responded that I would do whatever the board desired and that I was willing to step into the gap in any capacity to move the hospital forward. I am here for a purpose, and that is to ensure that our vendors are treated fairly, that the more than 700 employees continue to get a paycheck to put food on their tables for their family, and that the patients continue to receive high-quality, patient-centered care. To say that my plate is full is an understatement. I am pleased that someone as capable as Mr. Stokes has stepped forward and wants to be a part of our team to help move this organization into the future. From my due diligence on Mr. Stokes, I understand that he is an extremely talented healthcare executive, as well as a respected citizen of Nacogdoches. I would hope that the other citizens of Nacogdoches and Nacogdoches County will begin to rally around us like Mr. Stokes. I applaud him for his desire to work at the hospital and with this board to help move this hospital and preserve this hospital and this community's most treasured asset. Therefore, I respectfully rescind my name as CEO candidate, and I look forward to working with Mr. Stokes as his Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. Now what? Gary? Do we go ahead and do the interview and everything with Mr. Stokes? And
It seemed it would hurt.
I don't think it would hurt. I just want to make sure we're good with that.
Well, he's okay with it.
Is that okay? Board, is that all right with you?
Do we want to formally nominate him first before he makes his
No, he's
statement?
already,
He's on the agenda.
he's on the agenda.
Make sure he says yes.
Okay, step forward.
Well, thank you for your support. I was surprised, but very classy. Appreciate it.
Amen.
I guess probably your first question is, well, why would I be interested in this? And I've thought a lot about that. I would say 2.5 years ago, when I retired, I thought that was pretty much done. I was on for a new phase of my life, and then So I filled it with a lot of community service type issues. NEDCO was vice chair, now the chairman of NEDCO. I had 2 mentor kids. I've been mentoring them since the 5th grade. They're now in the 7th grade. That was kind of a highlight with retirement and be able to give back. Chamber board, solid foundation, just kind of, so people say, well, you're just as busy as when you, before you retired. And it was like, well, yeah, but it just seemed that there was something missing. And then I had an opportunity about 5.5 months ago with some associates I'd worked for in Cincinnati, Ohio, to ask if I wanted to do an interim job. And they have a consulting firm, and so I went down to CHI St. Luke's in Houston, the Vintage Hospital. I think it's on the resume. Well, actually, that's not, I just had a card because the time to put the thing in was a little short. But I stayed there 5.5 months, worked within that system, was the interim CEO. They had a previous CEO that was running Sugarland Hospital, and then they split his time, and so he was put in the precarious situation of running both Sugarland Hospital and the Vintage. And both he and the president of the system, Doug Lawson, determined that this was not really fair to either hospital, so they wanted to have a full-time. And so that's where I entered, and I accepted. I was full-time there for 5.5 months. It was kind of eye-opening to me. I know that I have the Navy background. I've always been kind of structured, but it was 2 takeaways were, one, I'm a very structured person, and sitting around and not filling my schedule totally was an issue, and I felt very comfortable. The second was I felt like I was back home. I was in my skill set. I knew what I was doing, and I was able to make a difference there. And it was it put in my mind, because of those 2 things, that what I would do when I got back to Nacogdoches was simply to start looking. I contacted B.E. Smith, the national search firm, and said, hey, I want to do more of this. And so they have my resume, talked to some other people. So my goal before I got back to Nacogdoches, and of course I would go down on the weekend, I'd come home on the weekends. I'd go down Sunday night or Monday morning, and I'd leave till Friday. I'd stay till Friday. So it's definitely full time. So I think that experience then translated to, okay, I want to talk to several people here in the community. Obviously, as chairman of NEDCO, I was very much aware of what was going on here. I always been. We love this community. We've been here 14 years now. We've got 5 children that graduated from Nacogdoches High School, and we've got a freshman. Thank goodness that'll be the last one. So the idea of giving back and helping people has always kind of been important to me. And when I got back and talked to some of the people at NEDCO and some other people in the community, it was like, maybe I could make a difference here. Maybe I could really kind of put some of the things in, like what I did in Houston, and with the background of knowing. And I guess a lot of people are saying, well, okay, you worked at Medical Center. Well, yes, I did. That was 10 years. But if you look at my resume, it's about 49%, I figured the percent. About 50% was for-profit. There was another about 18% or so that was Navy active duty, and then it continued with the reserves. But then there's another, about a third of the time, it is a nonprofit. My first job out of the county, out of the Navy, was a county hospital, Jefferson Regional Medical Center in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. That was my associate administrator's position. When I moved from that facility, which is 471 beds, I had my first CEO job, and it was a joint venture. It was working for a for-profit, happens to be just up the road in Tyler, Trinity Mother Francis and East Texas Medical Center. There was no love lost there. I had half the board members from East Texas and half the board members from Trinity Mother Francis. They rotated the chairs. Isadora Royce Weisenbaker, very prominent citizens in. We met together. So we built this hospital, and at that time, Mother Francis had the certificate of need, and East Texas had the funds. And so they came together and built University Park Hospital. So I was the first administrator, and they see I did one of those startups in a career. So that was good. But it was a management contract, even though I worked for the board and all, the management contract was with a for-profit company called Republic Health. So the background just kind of moved on from there. I think it's 6 CEO positions, 2 interims. And so there's been a lot of experience, a lot of learning. This job's all about relationships and people. And when you look at the hospital, it's basically quality of care first and patient safety. And then you have to take care of your people, and I break that into 3 groups, which is your employees, your physicians, and your patients. And if you've got happy employees and happy physicians, they'll take care of the patients. If you don't have that taken care of, then you can have issues. So let's see, I guess that's a little bit about why I'm here, and I guess what's the next thing, questions?
Okay, yes. What are your 3 biggest accomplishments?
3 biggest accomplishments. I guess the opening of a facility from scratch. In other words, when I was at, my office was in a patient room, and my secretary's office in another patient room at Trinity Mother Francis before we actually moved out in the site. So I mean, taking it from just a piece of dirt and 2 diverse boards, and then running that and being successful, I think, would certainly be one. I guess one of my other, I look back as accomplishments, is when I was recalled for Desert Storm, and I was the administrative officer, which would have been number 3 in command of a 500-bed combat zone hospital in Saudi Arabia, and being able to be a part of that. We were over there for 5 months. We set the thing up, ran it, or we were all blessed. It was a short war, so therefore a lot of assets were moved out, but they decided that if they moved the combat zone out, that they knew that the Marine Amphibious Force that we, or the Marine, kind of have a break in Marine versus Navy. Anyway, General Boomer's troops, they would be assigned, we'd retrograde, pull the hospital away, that would be a sign that maybe that wasn't good, so I ended up staying there extra time so that we could actually stay and put, and we cut the staff, 1,000 people, sent them back home. We kept the other 1,000 that we had. It was a very intense hospital. We had like 7 orthopedic surgeons, 3 neurosurgeons, but like I said, fortunate that we didn't have to use all those assets. So sort of that, I think that's in the top 3. I think when I left Medical Center, that we had a Leapfrog A. Everything seemed to be going well. We had a lot of quality issues, and I think that just being able to, that was my longest tenure in the hospital. That was 10 years. And I think that was certainly rewarding, and was in the top 3.
Thank you. What are your most important strengths, and why do you think those strengths would serve you well for an MH? I'm sure you've taken a look at the myriad of issues we had, of course, finance being number 1.
Yes. Well, I'm not a finance officer, and so one of my weaknesses is finance, so with Rhonda stepping up and all, I certainly worked very close with her. I think that one of my strengths is relationships, building relationships with the 3 factors I told before, which would be hospital staff, leadership, medical staff. In graduate school, you always used to pound into your head, how many of you have seen hospital staffs relocate? And the thing was, well, you don't see you see physicians, you don't see medical staffs relocate. Well, how many administrators do you see relocate? The point was ingrained there. If you can't get along with your medical staff, you're going to have problems. So I think that, let's see, what was the?
Just your most important strengths.
Oh, okay. So people, relationships, medical staff, employees. I think organization is another thing. I consider myself very organized. I'm also driven to get results. Just doing things. I mean, I did a SWOT analysis when I was in Houston. within the first 30 days. I would do the same thing here. I've looked at quite a bit of material on Memorial. You have a lot of those things. Certainly, you have a strategic plan and all, but I think one of the things that I would do, and it would be a strength, was to meet with all the department directors within the first 30 days. Also the board members in that time, so it'd be jammed with a lot of meetings, but basically, and then drawing and asking them to provide to me what they feel are the priorities and the concerns for either their departments or the hospital. And then also look at having department directors, not necessarily board members, but the department directors coming with their own assessment of their department and their hospital. I want to get the feedback from everybody. So I think that would be good. And then also you would line up the key positions, the medical staff officers and all, also the volume producers. Who are your big volume doctors? Meet with those positions, get the same perspective. In that one with medical staff, it's not normally a squad, it's just what are your concerns and priorities. So I think that's kind of a thumbnail sketch there.
Okay, thank you. What is your leadership style?
Leadership style is very participatory. I like to get input. I like to have people buy into what's going on. I'm a good listener. I want to draw people out and see what their feelings are, and then be able to make the decisions and make the recommendations, like to the board, on what I would see from an operations perspective.
Well, the next question on the list was, do you have any ideas of how to regain the trust of our staff, independent doctors, contractor, professional healthcare providers in the community? And I think you've already given that to us. The board has had a very difficult time developing a strategic plan, even with employing a comprehensive management company. What is your expertise in accomplishing that?
I think just about every hospital that I've had, with the exception of the 2 interim facilities, I've always had a strategic plan or a business plan. So I think that I'm very accustomed to working with the different people in that, putting the plan together and then executing it.
Describe 3 ways that you have demonstrated the ability to improve hospital efficiencies, performance improvement, and or financial operations.
Okay, 3. Say the question one more time,
Okay.
please.
Describe 3 ways that you have demonstrated the ability to improve hospital efficiency, performance improvement, and or financial operations.
I guess productivity would have to do with the programs and meeting with HR and with the directors and doing a top-down analysis regarding staffing, vacancies and turnaround would be a big thing. The people, cost, growth, kind of like the 4 pillars of which you deal with, and carrying that throughout the facility. Daily rounding, also a patient safety huddle normally in the morning, which you bring the key people in and you talk about what goes on during the operations during that day, and then following up with what's going on. So with the risk manager, case management, I think those were certainly areas that turned out well.
Thank you. Have you had an experience in bringing a management team or a board together that seems hopelessly divided?
Well, again, I guess in each job that's a challenge. Some of them were not as hopeless as others. But I think that's just part of the skill set in which you have to deal when you bring these individuals. A lot of people have agendas and different ideas. But I think the idea of working with those
just building the relationships.
Right, right.
What do you think will be the most challenging issue for you if you accept this position, and are you confident that you will be able to meet that challenge?
I hope that I'll be able to meet the challenge, because it's not gonna be just me, it's gonna be a group of people. And I think that probably the most challenging thing will be getting accustomed to the public hearings and the different things that go on and how the nuances with that go. I also think that a challenge, I have worked in the community hospital, but in our community, in Pine Bluff, when we just had, the press came in, it was open for the meeting, and then we would go into executive session. It wasn't as involved and as intricate of what I've observed and what goes on here. So I see the board as learning the board, learning how that works. I was surprised to see 13 subcommittees of the board. It almost kind of gave me the impression, well, do you want an operator, or do you want the board to run the hospital? And I think that's probably a super big challenge for me and for the board, is how are we going to strike a balance here? I'm accustomed to being told, okay, you run it, but you've got to get approval by the board in just about everything you do in regards to, there's I guess a trust factor that's involved, you've got to feel comfortable, and I don't know, you guys don't get paid for this, you're spending a tremendous amount of time. I'm not sure you have time almost to do some of your jobs, but the fact of if you're meeting weekly and running all these subcommittees and all, I think that's, part of my offer to me is, let me see if I can't help with that burden, loosen that up, because I think it's just too much for any board. I've never seen that in a board situation, so I think that's a huge challenge.
Thank
Can I
you.
jump in with a question? I'm sorry.
What?
Can I jump in with a question? You're speaking my language right now. I think those are all very needed things. Consolidation of some of our committees, limitations of how our committees meet, and how involved we are. So, as a CEO, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, you're gonna be faced with the challenge of checking us board members, because if you're gonna do daily rounds and team huddles and all that kind of stuff, which are great, I think they need to be done, you can't meet with us every day for hours on end. You can't do that. So
You're absolutely right.
how are you going, because we're all very independent, vocal people, that's why we're on this board, so we all are very opinionated. How are you gonna check that in a manner that will still give us the information that we want, but also take us away from running the daily operations of this hospital?
I think in those individual meetings, to listen to you as far as your expectations and what you want, and how you see things, and where you see the strengths and weaknesses of the hospital, and whether, particularly with the board members, that might be more than an hour, but I think in the first 30 days, I think that's gonna be key to give me time to then come back and say, okay, guys, this is what I heard, this is what I see, do you agree? And there'll probably be some disagreements on certain things, whatever, and I think the idea is, I'm here for this hospital to be successful. I've always been of the impression that this is a 2-hospital town, and sitting from economic development to see this hospital close would be devastating to the community. We try and get business in, we get real excited and get a 50-employee group. You're losing 500, 600 employees. I mean, that's just unacceptable. So, I mean, this hospital has to survive. And I think if we keep that in mind, we can get through some of these, some of the minor things or some of the personal type things.
So you wouldn't be afraid to tell Dr. Head to get out of the hospital if you needed to? Thank you.
And I will also say that it's open door. We just have to respect each other's time, because I'll be doing a lot of things, but I'm not a 8 to 5, 9 to 5 person. Of course, when I was in Houston, I just had an apartment, and so I would get there early and I'd stay till 7. So I'm accessible, and I think that having meetings and being accessible to you will help. Maybe not during the normal hours, but maybe I can set a time also for those.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
You have a
outsider looking in, you know, I'm just kind of curious to see where you would go with that, with attrition from staff.
Well, first, I guess I'd want to get a handle on just how bad that is. What is the turnover percentages? I've heard rumors that it's fairly astronomical in the EVS and maybe dietary and some of the other areas, because that's a tough place to work. So until I had a handle, I mean, you gotta work with sometimes recruiting, you have to work with outside agencies sometimes to get people in. It depends on what skill set and which employee population you're trying to get. But I think that, yeah, a plan would be put together, but I couldn't sit here and say, hey, here's how I would do that until I knew more what the issues were.
But you see it as something that needs to be addressed. I'm taking it just from an outsider looking in, from rumors you've heard, do you see it?
Yeah, from what I heard, I think that's probably at least one of the top 10 issues, is to kind of solidify staff. You know, when you're in a facility and you don't know whether you're gonna be able to pay the bills from day to day, I'm sure that you've lost a lot of really quality people because they just got scared and, you know, jumped. So stabilizing is huge into that retention issue.
You know, we recently hired Jennifer. How do you view the partnership and the plans we have for that, as far as finding a partner, and, you know, how do you, I guess, what's your opinion on that, or, you know, do you even feel like it needs to happen?
Oh, I definitely think it needs to happen. I was encouraged. I sat out in the audience and listened to both proposals. I think the idea, that's not something that I think myself or any of the board members can do. I think the idea of getting that skill set, and they're kind of 100% success at this point. And I think they're sincere about what's going on and have a fairly good handle with the hospital, but working with them, I think the concept is what's needed at this time. I think the days are gone for standalone facilities. It's just too complicated. There's too much going on, and part of the thing is how you get your systems and how you get the support. I was kind of spoiled because, you know, with the corporations or a nonprofit system, the larger systems have all of those type of things. You don't. And to try and survive with the reimbursement issues and all the regulatory things that are going on, I think it's just virtually impossible. And I think the hospitals that insist on remaining freestanding will probably fall by the wayside. And it's alignments. And how can you align up with whatever system, whatever, I guess, overview that would be.
Any other questions? Brian?
Don't take that off.
Unless you.
Well, I was fortunate to bring both doctors too, his wife and himself, and it was a good call. That was good.
Good fit. Kara?
Well, I'd like to move, if I might, and I had to write some of this stuff down to make sure I cover these things. I move for the appointment of Gary Stokes as our interim CEO effective today, the 4th of February, and to continue to such time as a permanent CEO is named either by the board, by board action, or the results of a decision of our selected partner, and to be paid the salary and benefits of our previous interim CEO until such time as a contract or agreement can be approved by the board and Mr. Stokes. Did I cover everything I needed to cover?
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Is that okay with legal?
I'm fine with it as long as Mr. Stokes, are you okay with,
Let's
with
get that out
accepting
there.
the salary and benefits of the, I guess, former CEO until such time as the contract can be approved by the board?
Well, I would like to have the opportunity to know what that is.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
He was working for a nickel a day, I don't think that's, but,
not quite that low. You're overconfident.
so conceptually, yes, I'd just like to see what the terms are.
So I'll make a motion to take it to executive session to discuss the contract with Mr. Stokes before
Does anybody know what these figures are?
We've got them.
We've got it.
Does.
Rhonda's
Rhonda
sitting right
knows.
there. So-
I'll second that motion.
I'll second.
Mr. King.
Okay, it has been moved and that we move into executive session to discuss the contract issues. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, the same, motion carries. We are adjourning into executive session at 8:34.